As you could probably guess, fair warning, this video discusses suicide, self-harm, and pretty much everything there is to go with 13 Reasons Why. 13 Reasons Why has always been on my radar. It was one of the few novels I actually could get through. I have a bit of a barrier to entry to reading anything that's not a graphic novel or comic. I can't say I had a special draw to it, especially because I can hardly remember most of the book. It was also on my docket to watch because when it came out, basically everyone, at least on the Degrassi subreddit, compared it to Degrassi. Having already read the book, as I said, I was a bit suspect into how much of a comparison you can make, but I finally decided to give it a try recently, and after 4 episodes watched, I dropped the show. Why, you might ask? Well, here's 13 reasons why I dropped 13 reasons why. First of all, Hannah's narration. It's not a bad way to start the episode or introduce the topic for the next tape, but sometimes the philosophical waxing can be a little too much, especially in those moments where the narration has more to do with the topic of the episode rather than what Hannah's talking about on that particular tape. It's not my biggest sticking point with the show, hence why it's number 1. Number 2, it has a sort of halfway understanding of self-harm. So they have a character, I think her name is Sky, and she's a cutter. How do we know she's a cutter? Well, because she had cut marks on her wrists. Yeah, my problem with this, as someone who used to cut themselves, this is not really realistic. Not her having cuts on her wrists, but her being so open about it, not trying to hide them. It's very clear that the only reason why they're out in the open so that Clay can notice them. And it's true, a lot of people unfortunately don't notice self-harm scars, but anyone who's ever self-harmed will know not to wear short sleeves like that. Even 3/4 sleeves. Or if you're gonna wear 3/4 sleeves, cut somewhere else. The first season does a decent enough job talking about these hard subjects, and then when it comes to self-harm, it's just a plot device. And definitely feels that way when we come to season 2 and Sky is apparently basically shut out from the story. And a quick disclaimer, I didn't get past season 1. I watched the first 3 episodes and then bounced around a little bit, and I didn't even watch season 2. So maybe what I've heard about season 2 aren't accurate, but as I will continue to explain, I'm not going that far. And speaking of season 2, number 3, Clay hallucinating Hannah Baker. When I heard that Hannah comes back in season 2 as hallucinations and has literal conversations with Clay, I thought they were joking. For a show that was so grounded in reality, that didn't seem right. Maybe they're gonna explore the PTSD or whatever has happened to Clay after having to go through the ordeal of these tapes and the trial. But apparently no. For a show so interested in talking about these dark subjects, apparently hallucinations isn't one of them. The way it was described to me makes it sound like it's a typical fiction trope. It's not even memories of Hannah anymore. He's literally having conversations with her about what is going on in the present. And it's not even imaginings of what she would say. It's basically the fiction trope of main character imagines their dearly departed loved one and through them makes decisions or something. Number 4, they don't really seem to care about their characters or the plot. So this is mainly another season 2 complaint. From what I understand, they basically did 180 on the characters of Mr. Porter and Mr. and Mrs. Baker. Mr. Porter is so short-fused and will attack people now. The Bakers were apparently terrible parents and had a terrible relationship with Hannah. That'd be okay, but why didn't they set any of this up in the first season then? Anytime we see Mr. Porter, he's calm, cool, collected, even under a ton of pressure. He's not the best person, but he's not hot-headed. And anytime Hannah brings up her parents, at worst they're arguing about the store. They're never nasty to her or abusive. Hell, they're not even on the list of people who she felt made her kill herself. It's as if the writers hoped that going from season 1 to season 2, basically our minds reset as to what the characters are supposed to be, so they're going to mold them into what they needed for the plot. And speaking of the plot, number 5, season 2 basically loses the plot. So the premise of season 1 is exploring why Hannah Baker killed herself, and then through that, how do we get justice for her? And then in season 2, there is a bit of trying to get that justice for Hannah, but then there's a ton of fights, blackmailing, Polaroids, basically everything that people complain about Degrassi being at its worst. Drama for drama's sake, but also trying to keep the air of danger that isn't really there anymore because the tapes are public. And then also trying to up the drama by having a kid come to school with a gun. The way I've seen it described, it's basically all over the place and rather unrecognizable from season 1. Number 6, it was Hannah's choice. It's not as big of an issue, but I think at some point in season 1, it needed to be pointed out that Hannah chose to kill herself. In the end, unless you're coerced, Suicide is a choice. Yes, terrible things like being sexually assaulted, watching your best friend get sexually assaulted, and having to go through high school with some terrible people, that could put a person in a dark place. A very dark one. And yes, while almost everyone on those tapes deserves some blame for what happened to Hannah, nowhere in the show does it ever point out that Hannah also made a choice. Just as everyone made choices that hurt Hannah, Hannah decided to stop existing. Sure, they were all mitigating factors, but Hannah was an autonomous person. It just bothers me that the series goes so far to make her this put-upon angel. And not that she wasn't put upon, but again, Hannah chose to kill herself. Number 7! I actually didn't have anything for number 7. The 13 Reasons Why I Quit 13 Reasons Why was more of a gimmick, but have you ever looked at the number 7? You know what it looks like? It looks like a death scythe. It looks like something that Grim Reaper carries around, and it's going to stab you, man. And here everyone's all like, oh, beware the number 6, it's so unlucky. And with their weird numerical stuff, number 7 is the lucky one, where it's really the one that's going to stab you in the back like the spy from Team Fortress 2. Seriously, don't trust 7. Number 8, Mr. Porter's tape. I agree, he didn't take the warning signs of Hannah's depression and imminent suicide seriously enough, but Hannah took issue with the fact that Mr. Porter didn't chase her as she left his office. Yes, I have felt this way too, but it's not reasonable, especially when you try to consider, well, sometimes people need their space, so you never know when they want you to chase them or they're being honest and saying, no, I want you to leave me alone. It's a thing that girls always get criticized for, saying one thing but actually meaning another, telling Clay to get away but actually wanting him to stay. And yet Clay and others take this as a damning thing against Mr. Porter. Yes, I know emotions are high, but for a show that's looking to explore these things, you kinda have to get this right. There is very little space for error. Number 9. This ties in with a lot of my other points, but 13 Reasons Why is overly dramatic. It's basically the worst and most dramatized points in Degrassi turned up to 11. Hell, you know what this is? This is the Don't Look Back movie. A lot of this is due to the fact that there's these incriminating tapes that are making their way around the school, and also that very serious crimes were committed, but then also there's points in the show where it's just like, did they really have to go with that? I.e. Tony having to be this dark, mysterious figure. Yeah, in the book he played a similar role, but he was never really out in the forefront. We didn't really suspect anything from him up until the end where it was revealed he was the one making sure that the tapes got to where they had to go. And also, the rock climbing, not only was how they did it very dangerous, especially considering they didn't have any, safety equipment, but it also added in needless drama. Why'd they have to climb all the way up there in order for Tony to reveal his relationship with Hannah Baker? Because it's more interesting that way. Not to mention it also drags out the runtime, and that's really what moments like these feel like. From what I've seen of the first season, much of it is twiddling their thumbs, just going from dramatic moment to dramatic moment, waiting to find out what happened to Hannah Baker. Number 10. The show is way too graphic. Yes, I know it's a show about depression, suicide, rape, and other messed up topics, but in trying to explore them, this show crossed the line. Thankfully, though I have heard about them, I did stop before the rape scenes, but unfortunately I did watch Hannah Baker's suicide. And the question that pops into my mind is, why? Why are they showing this on screen? Why do we have to see every intimate detail of her slitting her wrists? And then from what I've heard about the rape scenes, why do they have to give so much detail to such a horrible act? There's a reason why we didn't watch Claude or Cam kill themselves in Degrassi, and why we didn't watch the whole scene of Paige getting raped. It's because it's needless. There's nothing to be said to watching every intimate detail. We already get the jarring pain and suffering of the characters by just showing a few seconds of it. We only needed Paige repeatedly saying no while the camera panned to the window to know that this is going to mess up Paige, and what's going on is far from okay. 13 Reasons didn't have to do this. These scenes could have been just as effective without having to explicitly show them in action. For example, instead of showing Hannah slitting her wrist, what they could have done was have her longingly look at the box of razor blades, look more at herself considering what's about to happen, and then show her grabbing a razor blade, and then the camera cuts to the floor like it did in the show, showing the water overflowing and starting to turn pink. That's all they needed to do. Because You know what this scene did for someone like me who's had a history of cutting and depression and infrequent suicidal thoughts? It put me back in that place. I already knew I was gonna be there watching this scene, but having to watch it so graphically did something that Degrassi has never done to me. This wasn't an artistic move. This is torture porn, which leads into number 11. This show is basically torture porn. It's reveling in how messed up and depressed all the characters are, especially Hannah Baker. It's just one hit after another, and we're supposed to enjoy it? This is what a person writes in their edgelord phase, where it's cool because it's dark and gritty, and you're supposed to enjoy it because it's unhappy. They're doing the thing that has been plaguing comic books for years. It's apparently special art just because it's exceedingly depressing. It feels like the show is patting itself hard on the back for showing miserable people just continuing to be miserable 100% of the time. And frankly, that's not enjoyable. Again, you're asking yourself, why does it have to be 100% unhappy? Yes, this is a show about suicide and depression and all that, but even the first season of BoJack Horseman had moments of levity in between the title character making everyone's lives around him miserable. And you know what? Number 12, I'm too empathetic for this. A lot of my points up until now haven't been too personal, but this is one of the main reasons why I'm dropping the show. I honestly can't take this. Just watching the first 3 episodes put me in a depressive state that lasted the entire night. I can't sit through an endless slog of watching mostly good people be hurt. Hell, I can't even sit down and watch bad guys get hurt. I feel too much for people, even in fiction, even in things that I know aren't real. Hell, I have trouble watching certain episodes of Degrassi, so trying to watch what's basically camp suicide for an entire season, that's not gonna work for me. There's a reason why I can't listen to many of my favorite songs, because of their subject matter, because they put me in a bad place and I'm trying to take care of myself. And in order to do that, I need to not watch this show. And there's the fact that I can't keep binging on cookie dough, because that's literally what I had to do to pick my spirits up after doing the research for this video. And now, number 13. 13 Reasons Why is not Degrassi. If it had what I get out of Degrassi, then I'd be tempted to try to muscle my way through it. But it's not. Yes, like Degrassi, it deals with dark subject matters that most teen shows don't want to do or won't deal with in a realistic way. And also like Degrassi, it's a teen show. But that's really where the similarities stop. At the end of the day, Degrassi and 13 Reasons Why have 2 different goals. 13 Reasons Why has a very specific story to tell about a group of very specific characters, whereas Degrassi, it's a cross-section of high school life. They've got many different stories to tell and different characters to use to tell them. And then also, as I said, 13 Reasons Why feels the need to indulge in the darkness to the point where it's almost edgelordy. But with Degrassi, at the end of the day, they want to educate, to show that you're not alone when you're facing these things. Other people have been in your position. It also wants to show how people can get into those situations, but also how they get out or cope with them. Degrassi is just more mature. And not mature like it deals with adults doing adult things or that it's necessarily dark. It just tries to take an even and fair approach to the topics that it discusses. Yes, in a Netflix lineup, they would or should be put up in the same category, but at the end of the day, the point of Degrassi is something that 13 Reasons Why isn't going for. And that's okay. It doesn't need to be Degrassi, but I feel the need to point out the differences because they so often get compared, and 13 Reasons Why is often considered better than Degrassi, basically for that edgelordy stuff about reveling in the darkness. And yes, that does have its place, and I'm glad that shows are starting to talk about these things, but as I said, there is a right way to do it, and the margin for error is very slim. And in my opinion, as someone who's rewatched the series multiple times, Degrassi just gets it right more often. Thank you very much for consuming this video. If you want to talk to me about just about anything, feel free to hit me up on Twitter. You can find me at NotAVampyre. Thank you very much again, and until next time.